The dawn lay over London like a muted weight, swallowing sound and stretching shadows across the asphalt of London Oxford Airport. The runway lights shimmered faintly, leading toward the sky where private jets rested like silent monuments to wealth and power. From the terminal emerged Ethan Campbell, 38, tall and sharply dressed in a dark tailored suit and Italian shoes. On his wrist was a single leather bracelet, worn with quiet dignity, a gift from his mother, who once told him that true elegance lay not in display, but in restraint. In Ethan's face lived serenity, not arrogance. He had fought the world and carved out a victory, but his walk held no boast. He carried the look of a man who no longer had anything to prove. Yet, on that morning, the world reminded him that battles he thought he had left behind could return without warning. Ethan was born in Liverpool's rougher streets, in a cramped house where silence often echoed louder than words. His father disappeared early, leaving his mother, Eleanor, to hold together the fragile edges of their lives. From boyhood, Ethan sold sweets, carried flyers, and tinkered with broken computers. At 12, he repaired old desktops at a neighborhood internet cafe. By 17, he earned a scholarship in a social program for low-income youth and plunged into computer engineering. He rose with hunger as fuel and promise as compass. At 24, he founded Sustainable Roots, a startup that fought energy poverty through solar grids and digital access. Rejected by banks and mocked by investors, he pressed on until one NGO finally signed contract. Within 5 years, his company was active across Britain, bridging gaps governments ignored. But success, Ethan knew, never erased the shadows of where he came from. He had grown used to skepticism, the sharp looks, the hesitation in others' voices when they realized who he was. Still, he thought he had moved beyond it. Until that morning, as he strode across the tarmac toward his jet, he was intercepted by the pilot, a stiff white man with a practiced smile. "Good morning, sir," the pilot said. "The commercial terminal is on the other side. Do you need help finding it?" Ethan stopped, calm but firm. "No, thank you. I'm boarding. I'm the owner, Ethan Campbell." Silence pressed heavy. The pilot's gaze flickered between Ethan's ID and his skin. It wasn't ignorance. It was refusal. Ethan felt it immediately, the unwelcome weight of disbelief. The exchange dragged on. Even after scanning the QR code that displayed Ethan's name as aircraft owner, the pilot stalled, his voice clipped with doubt. "You're the owner?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "Registered in my name 2 years ago." The pilot's hand tightened around his radio. "I need to confirm something. Man claims ownership of this jet." Confirmation arrived quickly. "Ethan Campbell is the owner. Let him board." But even then, hesitation lingered like smoke. Finally, the pilot spoke words Ethan had heard before in 100 different ways, words that cut sharper for their predictability. "Apologies, sir. I just thought you were someone's employee." The sentence struck harder than any outright insult. Ethan stood still, his calm mask unbroken, though inside a familiar ache rose, anger mixed with exhaustion. His assistant, witnessing the scene, immediately called the charter company. 10 minutes later, the director phoned Ethan, apologizing profusely. The pilot was removed, stripped of command before the jet even powered its engines. Ethan boarded quietly, but the bitterness clung like tar. It wasn't the inconvenience. It was the reminder that in 2025, after all he had built, there were still people who looked at him and saw only impossibility. T-38, honored globally for his work, he still carried the burden of proving his right to exist in spaces money alone could not buy. Somewhere over the channel, Ethan opened his laptop. His fingers struck the keys with a rhythm sharpened by fury. He drafted a message, not emotional, not reckless, but clear and cutting. "Today, I was stopped from boarding my own private jet. The reason? A pilot didn't believe a black man could own one. This isn't about me. It's about what I represent, and about a country that still doubts us even when proof is in front of them. I don't seek revenge. I seek transformation." Within minutes of posting, the words spread like wildfire. Messages of support flooded in from leaders, activists, artists. But so did the critics. Exaggerating, playing victim, predictable, but piercing nonetheless. By the time Ethan landed in Geneva, His name was already a headline. He was scheduled to speak on innovation, but as he walked onto the stage, cameras flashing, he knew the script had changed. The audience expected answers, not just about technology, but about the wound he had exposed. He took a breath, looking across the room of world leaders, entrepreneurs, and journalists. The lights burned bright, and silence pressed against him like the dawn had that morning. Ethan adjusted the microphone, his eyes steady. "I came here to talk about innovation," he began, "but how can we speak of the future if some are still prevented from even reaching it?" The crowd leaned in, the room holding its breath. And in that charged pause, before he said what would either ignite a movement or brand him forever, Ethan realized he was standing at the edge of something larger than himself, something that could not be undone. Not everything was rosy. In Britain, Ethan's case ignited fierce debate. Some accused him of seeking attention, while business allies urged silence, warning his image might suffer. Ethan stood firm. "My image is the truth. If it bothers you, the problem isn't with me. It's with those who refuse to see it." Days later, he met with the Minister for Human Rights. He received honors, but what touched him most was a simple Instagram message from a 16-year-old in Brixton. "I'm black, poor, and I study with a borrowed phone. But when I saw you speak, I felt that I can too. Thank you for not being silent." Ethan read the words and wept, not from pain, but recognition. His struggle had become a collective cry for dignity. He was no longer just Ethan. He was a voice, a symbol. When he returned to Britain, Heathrow Airport was filled with cameras and questions. He remained calm. "I don't want a spotlight. I want change. And it begins when we stop normalizing the unacceptable." Soon after, the airline issued an unprecedented apology, launched mandatory anti-discrimination training, and dismissed the pilot. Ethan's name became synonymous with ethical resistance. Schools used his story in lessons on racial equality. Social movements gained strength. Young people saw in him not just success, but the power of calm defiance. Parliament even debated a law requiring airlines to adopt diversity and inclusion policies. Ethan rejected awards and contracts. "Don't turn my pain into a product, turn it into action." Wherever he went, he carried a spark in people's eyes, not because of wealth or fame, but because that day he had not flown alone. He had lifted a nation. One evening in Liverpool, he parked outside his childhood home. The house was renovated, but the scent of coffee and the creak of the gate remained. On the porch sat his mother, Eleanor, in her rocking chair. "You've arrived, my son," she smiled. "I've arrived, Mom," he said, kneeling to kiss her hands. As the sunset painted the sky orange and lilac, he told her of the trip and its impact, without vanity, as though it were someone else's story. "Did they hurt you?" Eleanor asked gently. "A little," Ethan admitted, "but they gave me strength and space for many others to enter." His mother's voice softened. "You flew, Ethan, even when they tried to clip your wings." That night, lying in bed, Ethan thought not of honors or contracts, but of young black boys who now believe they could also fly. Because sometimes, changing the world begins with a simple truth: we have wings too.